So, Micah, for the next 7 weeks, we're going to be talking about the 7 deadly sins and the virtues that are their polar opposites.
Very good.
Now, you probably have heard of these 7 sins. I mean, after all, I think there's been movies made about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In fact, I'm sure it's true. I think it's fascinating that people even went so far as to rate sin.
Mm-hmm.
Some are deadly. I guess that means some are not so deadly. What do you think?
I guess so, yeah, that's odd.
It's kind of strange.
Uh-huh.
An early list is found in Proverbs in chapter 6. There are 6 things that the Lord hates. There are 7 things that he cannot stand: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that kill innocent people, a mind that thinks up evil plans, feet that are quick to do evil, a witness who lies, and someone who starts arguments among families. I think that last one is kind of interesting, someone who starts arguments among families. The Hatfields and the McCoys should have read this, I'm thinking. But this kind of a list isn't limited to the Old Testament types. Early Christians made up their own lists. In the 4th century, that's the 500s, a fellow by the name of, and we've got to read this, Evagrius of Pontus came up with 8 deadly sins. And then John Cassian and Gregory the Great of the 5th and 6th centuries, respectively, took a look at the list and honed it down, coming up with the number 7. And that's a terribly convenient number because, of course, it's the 4 Gospels plus the Holy Trinity.
Easy to remember.
Easy to remember. And so it's an important number, a very important number. But it isn't just the significance of the number that is important. These guys insisted that the 7 deadly sins are deadly because they are the root of all other sins, which I find very fascinating. The root of all other sins. Maybe we can figure out how lust is the root of other sins. Be interesting to think about. The modern list, today's list, is pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. So today we're going to look at lust, and I hope that doesn't make anybody squirm. Sexuality is a tough topic for people on this side of the Atlantic, steeped as we are in the Puritan tradition. Sexuality, however, is a thing that separated Christians from their pagan neighbors back in the day. Christians stayed away, for example, from temple prostitutes, stayed away from others using others for their own self-gratifications. In fact, the Old Testament, using the Old Testament as a template, early Christians equated lust with sexual depravity with idolatry. So in Jeremiah it says, "So now while I will again tell what I have against you, said the Lord. I will tell you what I have against your grandchildren. Go across the sea to the island of Cyprus and see. Send someone to the land of Kedar to look closely. See if there has ever been anything like this. Has a nation ever exchanged its gods? Of course, its gods are not real gods at all. But my people have exchanged their glorious God for idols worth nothing." Now, back in the days of the Old Testament, why do you think that the Israelites were so interested in exchanging the God of Moses, Abraham, and Isaac for the gods of their neighbors? Do you have any idea how that might happen?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, a certain sort of like national envy seems just normal for even nations today, the way we kind of envy other cultures, I don't know, cuisine or something, but maybe just the sense that their God wasn't cutting it, wasn't doing the things that they wanted, so they
try somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good possibility. I'm also thinking about being plunked down in the middle of people that were different from them, and sort of being enculturated. If you marry somebody who is of a different Christian denomination, for example, you might find a lot more about their traditions and their customs than, of course, if you weren't married to them, for example. So enculturation happens back and forth. If you marry someone who is not an Israelite and not a Yahweh worshiper, then perhaps you start to take on the customs of the people around you.
Yeah, even if some of those aren't so savory.
Not if they're not so savory, and also that they're clearly against what your God has in mind for you to do. So here's another quote. The men from the cities of Memphis and Taphans have disgraced you by shaving the top of your head. Haven't you brought this on yourselves by turning away from the Lord your God when he was leading you in the right way? So definitely there's a strain through the Old Testament of the people turning away from God, of finding, I don't think I like the word satisfaction in other gods, but I'm not sure what other word I would use.
It certainly sometimes seems to be a matter of convenience when you've got the real God who's making demands of you and your other options are these idols. It seems kind of,
who might be a little laxer in their discipline.
Yeah.
Yes. Hosea says, the people of Israel, listen to the Lord's message. The Lord has this against you who live in the land. The people are not true, not loyal to God, nor do those things who live in the land even know him. Cursing, lying, killing, stealing, and adultery are everywhere. One murder follows another. Because of this, the land dries up, and all the people are dying. Now, before we go any further, I don't want you to think that all ancient pagans went around sowing wild oats with abandon. Early Greek philosophers like Aristotle were leery of lust because they thought it clouded reason. And for them, reason, of course, was all. Now, early Christian thinkers thought that Christ was coming again soon. Think about St. Paul. Didn't he say it's better to marry than to burn? But on the other hand, Christ is coming, so no need to get married unless you have to. And sex within marriage, for early Christians, was the only physical expression that was recognized. So people like Jerome, the woman hater, and like St. Augustine, the reformer, the reformed reprobate, were mostly in favor of chastity. And for the first 1,000 years of Christianity, celibacy was considered the highest form of Christianity. And of course, it isn't just Christianity that's at work here. Greek philosophy divided people into the body and the soul, and the church followed suit. So soul is good, body is bad, body is a burden. So it's best to deny the body. And of course, Eve was a woman, so naturally men had to stay away from women if they were going to pursue heaven with any kind of enthusiasm. That's the kind of thing that passed for logic back then. Now, present-day Christians, and I hope that includes all of us, don't generally find these attitudes all that logical or all that helpful, for that matter. However, when you consider the damage done to people as a result of the non-Christian world's attitude towards sex, which is use it or lose it, which ends up damaging people physically, spiritually, and emotionally, one wonders if there isn't just some sort of happy medium. So when you think about lust, can you think of two words that leap to mind when it comes to lust? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah,
here.
you are. Maybe insatiable would be one word, and well, I like that word use.
Yeah.
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 There's or maybe objectify, that would be another word that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's a good word. That's a good word. I use you because it's convenient, but you don't really mean anything to me.
Yeah, treating people as
objects,
or
yeah,
using them
yeah,
instead of treating them as subjects, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what comes to mind.
My bicycle doesn't care whether it falls over or not, but if I kick the kickstand, then it falls over. But a person would certainly mind if I did that to them, if I abused them in that kind of a way. So some of the questions that I have asked myself when I've thought about lust in general and lust in particular is, I wonder, do Christians put too much emphasis on sexual sin? And is that because all around us there's all sorts of television shows and advertisements and, I don't know, you name it, that seem to glorify sex as just the be-all and end-all of life? There's nothing else. What do you think? Do we, as a result, put too much emphasis on it, sort of as a action and a reaction?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think certainly in some circles of the church, it gets more fanfare or more attention than it really seems like it merits when you think about it certainly comes up in the New Testament, but the focus is usually on Christ and his person and not so much on...
Right, it's on helping people. What does Hosea say? Help others and walk humbly with your God. That's not really a good translation, but that's all I can come up with right now. This emphasis is on treating people as you wish to be treated, and on loving God first and foremost. And so I would assume that treating people the way you wish to be treated would exclude abuse.
Yeah, that seems like a good... consent, of course, is such an important criterion today in thinking about sex for a good reason. But I like that application of the golden rule to thinking about how we conduct ourselves with other people. It's not just consent, it includes also that sense of, well, what would I want? And seeing someone else as a real subject.
That's right, seeing someone else as a human being along with yourself rather than just what some of those novels have portrayed people as being just the used and the user. Used and the user. I'm going to read a statement by a fellow named Solomon Schlemiel, and then I'm going to ask you if you agree or disagree, so I'm going to put you on the spot again. A characteristic of lust and of our sexually proactive popular culture is to exaggerate the importance of sex in life. To a certain extent, this is a reaction against early puritanical attitudes, but to give the impression in advertising and the mass media that happiness depends upon being forever sexually active and fulfilled is to propagate a grand lie. Lust falsely asserts that love in the absence of sex is not possible, and that sex satisfies in the absence of love. That's pretty dense, I'm thinking. That's pretty darn dense.
It seems like a good point, though. Just thinking about the way that, sex sells in advertising, and it's used as this way to kind of grab our attention. I do think it sometimes does the same function in how we talk as Christians. It catches our attention because it's this thing that we've put so much importance around. But it seems like it should draw our eyes toward something else besides just sexual union or marriage.
Right. Of course, we are handicapped speaking in English. In Greek, there's more than one word for the word in English, love. And so in Greek, you can have various shades of that term. It can be friendship. It can be the love between man and woman. It can be the love of children. There's many shades and variations. And so when we use the word love and we think about sex, sometimes I think they get conflated rather than they become what they should be, which is an expression of love, but not the only expression of love.
Yeah, I like that distinction about the different kinds of love in Greek, and just think about the way that the New Testament talks about love, and greater love has no one than to lay down one's life for one's friends, and the friendship seems like kind of the more important kind of love in the New Testament rather than just, lovey-dovey or even,
kissy-kissy, all that kind of good stuff. Well, unfortunately for us, or perhaps not so unfortunately, Jesus is irritatingly plain when it comes to lust. You have heard what's said, do not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So here's the issue. Sin isn't only what you do. Sin is also what you think, your attitudes, and your interior life. What do you think about that?
Yeah, on the one hand, it seems like even more punishing, more legalistic, like not only can you not, commit adultery, you can't even look this way, which I think is part of it, but seen sort of in a positive light, it seems like Jesus cares not just about our physical our physical well-being with other people and that rightness, but also about the rightness of our hearts and wanting to heal what's there too, not just what's happening out in the world.
Because if you think it and want it, aren't you more likely to try to do it, to satisfy yourself?
Right, yeah.
Well, this might have, well, it does, I guess, have something to do with lust, but if I think about Reese's Pieces long enough, I have to go to Loblaws and get them. The word lust appears 7 times in the New Testament. So it doesn't limit itself, however, to sex. In the past, all of us lived like them, trying to please our sinful selves and doing all the things our bodies and minds wanted. We should have suffered God's anger because we were sinful by nature. We were the same as other people. I want it, I'm going to get it. That's the bottom line. Dear friends, you are like foreigners and strangers in this world. I beg you to avoid the evil things your bodies want to do that fight against your soul. And so our bodies want to do a lot of different things other than simply, have sex. Our bodies want to experience all sorts of things that perhaps are not the best for us. And I think that's where this warning comes in. It's not just about our actions, it's about thinking about those kinds of actions. Now, the early church, of course, was quite interested in limiting sexual pleasure because they were of the opinion that that was what pagans did. And so in order to show a distinct difference between the Christian family and pagans, a line certainly had to be drawn. Sometimes the Greek word that's used in the New Testament is used for lust, but sometimes it's used for other desires. And so there's a difference there. It can be lusting after a new car. It can be lusting after a new house. So lust isn't just simply about the body, it's about the mind desiring something intensely to the exclusion of other things. But even though the Christian leadership tried to damp down, to make a difference between the Christian community and other communities, do you think that meant that they were totally against sex? So, because if lust is only a sexual sin, it would appear that chastity is its opposite. So, can you tell me a word that you might associate, word or two that you might associate with chastity?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
that's a tough one.
chastity, it's not a word that we use very much.
No, it
I
isn't.
think,
It is not a popular word in the world today.
Yeah, some kind of, there's a sense of limitation to it.
Yes, yes.
Certainly has some negative connotations.
Yeah, it seems like chastity is for those who are not with it. Chastity is for those who, I don't know.
We get past in the
right, past in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
It makes me think of there's a quotation G.K. Chesterton says where he says something like, chastity should be something flaming like Joan of Arc.
Yes.
Like it's not just this negative virtue, it's this total commitment, this total desire for goodness or for for love in the best sense, and that necessarily means saying no to other things.
I think too that when we think about chastity, we don't really think about priorities. Is our priority toward our partner, our marriage partner? Is our priority toward ourselves? Is our priority where does God fit in all of that? And maybe chastity is a word that we could equate with priorities. What's important? What's the most important thing?
Putting the first things first.
Luther, whom of course I love and adore, saw nothing wrong with sexuality, saw it as a part of the human condition. But he did believe that sexuality had to find its expression through proper God-directed channels. But it has to be respectful. Sexuality has to be respectful. It has to be expressed in healthy, life-affirming ways. So when we think of life-affirming ways, I think about politeness, about being concerned for the other. I think about being aware of the other's needs, and that the other is not to be consumed by me, but to be supported by me in positive and God-given ways. What do you think? Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes the way we think and talk about sex, it's like none of the normal rules of social interaction apply. And it's interesting how in our culture we sometimes hear like people talk in metaphors of like hunter and hunted or prey, and it really seems to obscure the fact that this is different than normal social interaction, but it's only different insofar as it's more intimate. And I think that should bring a greater degree of, as you said, respect and attention to the other. Yeah.
The idea of chastity in marriage is, I think, that you do not view your partner as the other, that you view your partner as part of yourself. I mean, the marriage rite indicates that.
One flesh, yeah.
One flesh, yeah. So thank you, because I couldn't remember what it was. So chastity is not, I don't think, the anodyne for lust, but it certainly is a way of expressing it and expressing love in God-created channels that are not normally available.
Yeah, I think I like that word channel. Like the sense of a river kind of flowing in a properly directed way. I think it's not hard to think of ways that sexuality can get mangled, and the scandals that come out about in the past 2 years of especially men in power using their power in really abusive ways.
Which is another, I think, John Cassian says that other sins come out that can be generated through lust. And I think power is a sin. The abuse of power is a sin that comes out of lust, of wanting to be in control of everything. And in a way, maybe lust is a form of control, because you control the other.
Yeah, which seems fundamentally disrespectful of that person's humanity. Yeah.
Exactly. Other sins that lust can generate? I don't know. I just think that the sin of selfishness is one that certainly lust is the basis of, and we get it from there. I don't know. I think that I wish people were here so we could have conversation and with others and ask questions back and forth. But we can't. COVID has taken care of that possibility. So perhaps we'll just say that let's talk about our own society just for a second. Do you think that our society has made lust more acceptable than perhaps it used to be? And of course, it's not just sexuality that we're talking about.
Mhm.
It's the general I want, I deserve, I need, you know.
Yeah.
I just was thinking about that commercial, you deserve a break today? Well, why? Why do you deserve a break?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely a sense that in the ways that sexuality and lust and just sort of a drive for selfishness have been caught up in advertising, and we're given a lot of encouragement to seek our own desires, but how those desires work out in reality is sometimes obscured from us, like
Yes.
the real commitment that any kind of sexual union brings with it, or the
Right.
possibility of children.
Right.
These things are not often shown at the end of the rom-com. It's the wedding and then
Right,
the
then
movie's over.
That's right. And they lived happily ever after.
Yeah,
Maybe.
if only. Yeah.
If only, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, lust is the first, and we're going to move on next week to gluttony. So be thinking about that. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, Micah.
Thank you, Susan.